Hello, welcome to my little talk about Duxbury's old village schoolhouses. It's September and children everywhere are getting ready to go back to school, even though this means something different this fall than it usually does. It also does mean something very different this year than what it did in the past. So maybe that'll help us feel a little better. Today, we have one public school for students at each of the different grade levels, but this was not always the way. We can look at this map of Duxbury from 1894 and see that then the town was really a collection of 12 small villages. I'll use my pointer and I'll do that occasionally as we go through. See here the numbers? Those are showing you the different villages. Okay. So each of the villages had most of what the villagers needed from day to day, like general stores, blacksmiths, and schoolhouses. Why? This was important because transportation was so different back then. It was much slower. Today, the bus picks you up and whisks you off to school, usually on time. Can you guess how children got to school in 1890? They walked. Or, if they were very lucky, maybe they owned the newest, best invention of the day. Can you guess what that was? It was a bicycle. But those were still rare and expensive. So, one important reason for villages to have their own schoolhouses is that they needed to be close by. You may be surprised to learn that there were not always schools. And then, even when there were, children were not always required to go to them. Laws had to be passed in order to make these things happen. Massachusetts led the way in getting children to school. In the early 1700s, Massachusetts Bay Colony passed a law saying that towns had to have schools. The first school in Duxbury was built in 1714. It took another 117 years after Duxbury had a school for the state to say that children actually had to go to it. That law said that children between 8 and 14 had to go to school for at least 3 months a year. This is much less time than states require now. Also, children in the same town but in different villages might have very different rules for how long their school year, or their school day even, would last. All of these rules change over time. We can look at different documents that have been preserved to learn what children were taught and what their experiences were like. If you've attended Chandler or Alden, you're familiar with green tickets in Dragon Deeds. This document is called a Reward of Merit. It's basically a green ticket from the 1800s. I guess teachers have always used small rewards to encourage children to behave. I think this one is very funny. Can you read it? Can you see what is happening in the picture? What's the girl holding? It's a whip. What type of behavior do you think is being rewarded here? My guess is that it's for the boy's hard work. I wonder if a child receiving this reward would have found the picture funny as well. The next idea I wanted to explore with you is where children attended school. These are 3 familiar buildings in town that you might drive past every day. They used to be village schoolhouses, and they are still in use today with different purposes. 2 of them, the Girl Scout House and the Legion Hall, were once one-room schoolhouses, built in earlier periods when children of all different ages learned in the same rooms together, usually from the same teacher. The Tarleton Center started out as a one-room schoolhouse, but it was added on to in 1908 to become a more modern style grammar school where children of different ages learned in separate spaces. So now when you drive past these places, you'll know what they are now as well as what they used to be. Here's a picture of the Millbrook School, the current Legion Hall. Pause the video and zoom in on the picture. How many children are pictured here? Look at them and think about what it would have been like for them to all be learning together in one room from one teacher. This is a drawing of another village schoolhouse that does not exist today. It was called the Point School, and it was located over a stream on the north side of Powder Point Avenue. This school became very weather-beaten over time. It had to be relocated. The floorboards creaked and there were cracks between them. So, do you know what the children did? They dropped lines and caught fish through the floorboards of their school. What do you think it would have felt like to try to learn from inside this building in wintertime? Do you think that paying attention would have been easy or difficult to do? The Point School is important and famous for another reason also, not just for the fishing through the floorboards. It was the first school to have a student government. For the first time ever at this school in Duxbury, students were encouraged to choose leaders and make rules for themselves. Their teacher told them, right here, "We must govern ourselves, or we could not help to govern our country wisely." What does this mean to you? How would you put this quotation into your own words? And the question I would really like to know the answers to is, what rules would you create for your school? These are a few more class photos from our archives. Zoom in and inspect them. They're fun to look at. Look at the expressions on the children's faces. What objects do the children have with them? Can you see some clues as to what activities they enjoyed? I'll give you one. What's that? Something familiar. What do you think of their clothing compared to the clothes that you wear to school today? Those are just a few questions I can think of, but maybe you have others. This is the Green School. I bet you can guess why it was called that. It was built in a later period than the village schoolhouses that we were looking at photos of in the previous slides. Does it look more modern to you? It was built at the same time as the Tarkin School was added on to in 1908. And as I mentioned, it was the beginning of children being separated in different classrooms by their ages. Does that sound like a good change to you? How come? These are just a few examples of children's schoolwork and school books from our archives. Just like school children today, students in the late 1800s studied spelling and penmanship. You can zoom in and see how they made their letters. This is some penmanship work. Can you read it? Is their style similar or different from how you write today? Finally, I love this picture. It's fun to look at it and think about what the children were doing and feeling. What do you think? If you were standing in front of the school looking at this scene, what noises might you have heard? What emotions do you think the children were feeling? How do you feel looking at the photograph? The sunlight there makes me feel warm, and in general, it makes me smile. This is a set of driving directions for you to explore Duxbury a bit more. It will take you past the buildings and markers that still stand today to remind us of the old schoolhouses. If you drive around and find these spots and think about what you learned in the slideshow, I bet you'll see these locations differently the next time you pass by. That's because you'll understand their significance. Can you find all 6? All of these sites and more are tagged on this Google map. Click through and explore it. Let me know what you think. I've asked a lot of questions today, and I'd love to hear some of your responses. Please email me and let me know what they are. I'm right here, and thank you for listening. Bye.